Should America be supporting Ukraine?
A just question, my liege.
Should a major power invest itself in a relatively small country that has only recently declared its independence? I mean, we're talking about a country that has a small military, a military that is even dependent on foreign militaries for training, a country with a negligible navy, a country that has had issues with treason and corruption, a country that has suffered the setback of the losses of major cities. I mean, does such a country even have a chance against one of the most powerful militaries in the world? Well, thankfully, France said yes. You see, what I'm talking about is our own revolution. We were a small country that had only recently declared our independence. We had a negligible army. We had an even less than negligible navy, with the exception of a warship that was given to us by the French. We were dependent on foreign assistance even for our training. If you remember Baron von Steuben in that fateful winter at Valley Forge, we had trouble with corruption and with treason. Very famously, Benedict Arnold, or infamously, who was one of our most capable generals who sold out to the British. And we had suffered setbacks. Less than 6 months after declaring our independence, we lost New York City. But the French decided to invest in us after all. There was a battle in Saratoga, New York. The end result was that British forces under General Burgoyne surrendered shockingly to American forces under the command of General Horatio Gates. This was such a significant victory and a turning point in the war that it convinced the French that they could come out and support us openly. They were already supporting us somewhat secretly, but now they could come out in the open and give us significantly more military support that was absolutely decisive at the Battle of Yorktown, which was the final major battle of the war, and one that convinced the British Parliament that it was no longer worth funding this war to suppress the rebellion in America. So, what has Ukraine done that's similar to that? In the past, Russian volunteer units that have organized themselves to fight against Vladimir Putin had carried out raids into Russia from Ukrainian territory. This would be the Russian Volunteer Corps, this would be the Free Russia Legion, and the Siberian Battalion. And these were Russians fighting against the forces of Vladimir Putin. So these were Russians invading Russia. But with the invasion of Kursk, uniformed Ukrainian troops waving Ukrainian flags have invaded Russia proper, and there has been no nuclear response. Many of Putin's inner circle know that we have nuclear weapons, and to use nuclear weapons would be absolutely disastrous for Putin. He's not concerned about how many Russians would die. He is concerned about whether he would stay in power. And the first use of nuclear weapons could be very quickly the end of his regime. So where does this leave us now? It leaves us with a window which is still open. It's closing, but there is still a window of time in which we can support Ukraine to victory and the recovery of her 1991 borders if we give her enough. Now, unlike the French aiding us in our revolution, which required them sending in their own forces, this is not necessary in Ukraine. In fact, Ukraine has not asked for one foreign soldier to come to their aid, but they have repeatedly asked for the weapons, the munitions, and the technology that we have, which we have trickled in, and the permission to use it as they see fit to finally put the Russians on the defensive. It is we who should be setting the red lines and telling Russia when they need to start withdrawing from Ukraine. Can we end this war soon? Frankly, there's one man that can end this war in 24 hours, and that is the dictator Vladimir Putin, who started this war all on his own initiative in February of 2022. And he will bring an end to this war if he can be convinced that it's too costly to stay in Ukraine. The question is, what are we going to do to make it too costly for Putin to remain in Ukraine. One last thought. That is that for about 150 years, American colonists, at the time English citizens, had enjoyed a measure of self-rule and autonomy over here in North America. And when a particular king determined to take that from us, he discovered that we had tasted freedom and that we were willing to fight to keep it. Likewise, Ukraine has thrown off the Russian yoke. This they did in 2014. And since then, they have not only been willing to fight for it, they have been fighting for it, shedding their own blood for their own liberty. Ukraine's situation is serious, but it is by no means hopeless. As long as Ukraine maintains the will to fight, and the West maintains the will to support Ukraine by giving them what they need to win that fight.
Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to, Sam? There's some good in this world, Mr. Fertile. And it's worth fighting for.